Hey there, welcome to the Compared to podcast. I'm Heather Creekmore, and I am so excited to be joined today by my team. We are going to have another group chat, and we're going to talk all about pregnancy and postpartum body image issues. And I hope that if you are in that season of life, or maybe you're getting ready to enter that season of life, or maybe coming out of that season of life and feeling like you did it wrong or something, whatever our culture tells us, I hope that you will find some encouragement here today. So, team, I would love for everyone just to say your name so we can kind of identify your voice as we listen and tell us kind of what you do as part of the Compared to Who team. Let's start with Tara.
Yes. Oh, good morning. Hello. Good evening. Whenever you're listening, this is so exciting to be here with you guys. I always love our time together and to chat. This is Tara, and I am so just privileged and humbled and absolutely love being a coach for Heather and just being here to support and provide any type of assistance I can anyway, because this is just the most amazing experience, having been a participant and a client of hers, and now able to just share with all of you the freedom that I just gained through this journey with her. So
Thanks,
psyched to be here
Tara.
today.
Thanks. Jackie, why don't you go next?
Hello, I'm Jackie, and I am the YouTube manager.
And you are how many months pregnant today?
I am 6 months pregnant as of tomorrow. So,
Woohoo! You are
yeah,
you
so
are
I
in it.
guess I'm in the hot seat today.
You totally are. Because now, Tara, you are how old is your youngest? She's
Yeah, so my baby, oh, she's 10 now. She's double
so
digits. So
it's
yeah.
been 10 years since you've been pregnant.
Oh,
Jackie's in it. Rachel, you're not pregnant, are you? Or you want to make an
Oh
announcement today?
heavens, no, 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 no. We are. That was a beautiful season of life, but I am done with that. My girls are 16, 13, and 9 now. So I am 9 years out of it, but it's still, it's still fresh on my brain, I think, a little bit. So
And what do you do as part of the team?
well, I had the honor and privilege of being one of your clients and loved group coaching and the body image freedom framework. It was so fun. And now I am on a mission to try to take this amazing message you have created to the younger generation, to the teenage girls, college girls. We work with them here in Texas. And so I'm just so excited to see where God takes it.
Hey. And Presli. Now, are you going to make an announcement today, Presli?
Hey,
It's more possible for you.
yeah, no.
No, not today. Okay. Okay. So tell us what you do on the team, and your boys are little still.
Yeah, so I mostly handle like Instagram and Pinterest and stuff like that and make the post for the podcast and just whatever we're doing at the time. So like the 40-day journey, if you've seen those things on Instagram, I probably made those or sent you a message. But yeah, so that's what I do for the team. I found Heather, I think, listening to another podcast, and I was in the middle of the body image beast, I think a year and a half ago now. So like I'm a year and a half out. And yeah, so there is hope and freedom. What else? Oh yeah, my boys are 9 and 3. So it hasn't been that long for me. So I still am pretty fresh.
Super fresh. Yeah. So my youngest will be 14. So I am the furthest out from this experience. And I was trying this morning to just kind of remember, and I've shared before, we've got a couple other episodes we've done on pregnancy and body image, but it's been a number of years. But I shared before, I remember my arms grew, which was just weird. Like none of my shirts or my coats fit after I was pregnant with my first. And I remember, so for me, having an undiagnosed eating disorder for who knows how many years, for me, pregnancy was like the first time in my life when I wasn't on a diet because I
yes.
I knew enough to know that being on a diet would not have been good for the baby. And so
Yeah.
it was probably the first time since maybe like 5th grade that I wasn't dieting. Um, and I remember oh my word, I needed meat really badly, all the time. And I was very particular about the temperature of water. Like my husband ran into a convenience store one time because I needed water and he brought me a bottle of like tepid water and I threw a fit. I was like,
Unacceptable.
it needs to be cold. Like you're gonna have to go back in there to do something about this. So I remember some of that stuff, but like from a body perspective, like, and I shared about this in compared to your book. Like I remember like feeling like I was at Weight Watchers again when I had to weigh in at the doctor's office.
Yes. Yes.
And I remember getting worried as that number went up and up and up. And honestly, I had like my husband's weight in my head, like that number. And like as I got closer and then went past that, it was like, whoa, like, is this okay? Um, and then I remember afterwards, so I think it was I cannot remember what celebrity it was now. That's horrible. But with my first, there was some celebrity that had a baby like within a week. And so I remember every time I went to the grocery store, I would see like where she was at postpartum. And and we're going to talk about this today too, I hope, like bounce back. Like she bounced back like super fast. And so it was like, oh, well, if she did that already, then like I have work to do. So there's so many layers to this. And where I would love to start our conversation today, I think to just maybe let's just think about encouraging and talking about what happens when you're in pregnancy, where Jackie is right now. Like this
Well,
feeling you have about your body. Go ahead, Jackie. Yeah, jump in.
I can start. I would say for me, just to go back a little bit. So I didn't mention this, but I have a 3 and 4 year old as well. So this is my third pregnancy. And as many women know, every pregnancy is different. But I think that pregnancy has been the thing that God has used to initiate my recovery from what I thought was food issues, but now I know are body image
Wow.
issues. And
Wow.
so the few years before I got pregnant, I was in a larger body most of my life, but the few years before getting pregnant, I was smaller. And I would say I had a lot of disordered behaviors. And so when I got pregnant, it was that initial like, oh, okay, it's okay to not diet, but I was exercising heavily during my pregnancy. And I was really nervous about the numbers on the scale. And like you said, the doctor feeling like Weight Watchers, that's such a good description because I dreaded my appointments. Like, and just because of that, just because I had to step on the scale, like all the excitement of seeing the ultrasound, it kind of was all diminished until after the fact when I could calm down. But that feeling of like shame that comes with, oh, did I gain the right amount? Is this the recommended amount? Am I doing it right? And I think also I experienced a lot of sickness with all 3 of my pregnancies. And so just that feeling of being totally out of control with what happens, but at the same time feeling like somehow it's all your fault. It's sort of a cognitive dissonance of like, this isn't my fault, but it feels like it's my fault. So there's a lot of shame, even though I feel completely
Yeah.
out of control. And
Yeah.
it just feels really messy. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and like I said, they've all been different. I can talk more later about what this one has been like compared to others, but that was sort of my initial experience with pregnancy. I mean, I just felt like, oh, I still have a lot of work to do. And actually, being pregnant is when I first joined Celebrate Recovery in a food issues group because I thought I am out of control. I can't gain weight the right way in pregnancy. Like that was when it all sort of spiraled for me.
Wow. That's really, really good. I just want to point out something you said that just I thought was really good. So it's like, I think we have a ton of information. Like we were joking the other day about the pregnancies, what was it called? The baby center emails, which I don't think are even a thing anymore. I think they come from someone else. But like, so 19 years ago, when I was pregnant for the first time, I remember getting the baby center emails, and they said like, today your baby is the size of a grapefruit. Today your
Yeah.
baby is the size of a kiwi, right? And that was like
Yes.
so exciting. And I also remember them saying things like, today you might have a pain in your right arm, and it'd be like, I do have a pain in my right arm, like pregnancy. So, but because we have so much information, there is this sense that because I'm so informed, I have responsibility. I have to do this correctly. There's a path to follow. I have to do all the things. And then you're so right, Jackie. Like I never felt more out of control in my life because it was like, I know what my body's doing. Like, where's my hair going? Why are my arms growing? Like, what in the world? Like, I have no control over this.
Yes.
Right. So that's solid. Presley, jump in.
So yeah, what Jackie said reminded me of like when I was pregnant the first time 9 years ago. I was really young, and I don't know if I'm goofier than the average person, but yeah, so when I got pregnant, I thought it was my job to grow the baby, that I needed to eat. I needed to eat a lot. So I gained 90 pounds my first pregnancy, and I was eating a lot. And my doctor never said anything to me. So that just made me think of like how much it matters your doctor. Like, because my doctor never said a word. Like, she didn't say what are you doing at home or anything like that. And then my second pregnancy, the doctor was Samuel, my youngest. Every appointment, he was like just hammering on the weight. Oh, you've gained this much, slow it down. You don't actually need to eat anything extra. I'm like, okay. So every time I went to see him, I would actually know I was about to get in trouble. So I think it really matters too about your doctor, and their personality and beliefs and everything can really influence how you feel and even what you gain or don't gain.
How stressful that is too. Right. Like,
Oh,
cause
yeah.
that's the other thing. Like, you're supposed to make sure you're not stressed. It's like, but I'm stressed. I'm not going to the doctor. Tara, jump in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it brings me back, and it's so crazy because I'm 10 years out, right? And I can still feel the emotions of going through these experiences that you girls are talking about now. And as you were talking, Jackie, and then, mentioning having the differing doctors, it reminds me too of there's just this state of ambivalence that we are in our entire pregnancy. It's like these two paradox emotions completely and like this tension. So on the one hand, there's this like, I'm growing this life and this beautiful experience that like, and for some women, they've worked like it's been harder to get pregnant, right? Like with my first son, it was really hard for me to get pregnant. He's 13 now, and it was come to find out, and like you said, Presley, it was the blessing of the doctor I had. I went to see her, and it was during the time when I was doing extreme dieting to the point of, I'm sure you all remember the master cleanse or the lemonade diet. I had been doing
Oh,
that
yeah.
previous to that. So I was literally not eating food for a while, and I had gotten down to a smaller weight. But if I went to any doctor, I was in what they would have called like my don't even get me started on BMI, but I was in the upper range of my BMI still after doing
That's me.
the master cleanse lemonade diet for, I think I did it for almost 21 days, because this particular, diet was safe for 40 days. But that's a whole nother podcast, right? But I mentioned all this because I remember going into that doctor and her saying to me, so kindly and so lovingly, like, sweetie, you need to go home and eat some ice cream. Like, you need to gain some weight. Like
Wow.
your body's too small. Like, it doesn't feel safe to have a baby. And, she didn't necessarily use those words and terms, but it was really, gosh, it was really like, I remember, I think I even cried in the office because first of all, I felt like someone was giving me permission to actually eat foods that I hadn't eaten forever. And there was such joy in that. And then I was crying because I was
Yeah.
terrified. Because I was absolutely terrified. I can't eat ice cream. I can't eat. You're telling me I have to let my body get bigger. And it's like, I knew once the baby started to grow, there'd be no dieting. Once I knew I was pregnant, I would have to accept it. But before I'm pregnant, I have to get bigger. You mean like I have to let myself get bigger even before I'm growing a life? Like, no, 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 no. It's only okay if I'm growing the life inside me. And like that dissonance and that, like you said, Jackie, that dissonance and that ambivalence of like, there's this beautiful life growing inside me. And the culture in the world around has been telling me my whole life that gaining weight is a bad thing, that being in a larger body is a bad thing. So how do I reconcile that I have to have this larger body and it's good for my baby, but yet it's bad for me and it's bad for the way the world looks at me, or it's what will people think? And then to top that off, we have the comparison of, we know every woman's body changes differently in pregnancy. So I always joke around with people like my earlobes got bigger in pregnancy. Like every part of me just whoosh. And that was really hard too, because I'd go into stores and there'd be these women and I'd look at the back of them. You can't even tell they're pregnant. Then they turn around with this little baby bump. And there I am thinking,
Oh,
oh my
yeah.
gosh, like I can't even get my shoes on. I can't wear shirts like you, Heather, with the arms. I mean, it was every part of me. So it's just that tension is such a hard place for us to live in. And there's guilt and shame with that too, because here I am supposed to be saying, thank you, Lord, for this beautiful gift you've given me, something that means everything to me. And yet at the same time, I'm terrified and I feel bad about it.
I really appreciate you pointing that out, Tara, because I get emails all the time from women who tell me things like, my husband doesn't want me to get pregnant and have another baby because he doesn't want me to gain weight again.
Yikes.
Or I
Oh.
don't want to because I'm afraid. Like, okay, I did okay, quote unquote, whatever that means. I didn't gain that much, or I lost it quickly, or whatever, but I did okay the first time or the second time. But I don't know. I'm going to be older this time. Like, what's going to happen? Like, all of those fears are very real. And it would be very overly simplistic and potentially cruel to be like, well, just remember, like, what a magical, beautiful, amazing thing you're doing. Like, when you hold up having a baby compared to
Yes.
having a bigger body, like, of course, the one is more important than the other, right? And I think everyone in that spot knows that. Right. And it just adds
Absolutely.
guilt and shame onto, like, oh, I'm embarrassed that I feel this way. Like, I feel ashamed that I feel this way. But I think until you can, I did an amazing episode with Dr. Dan Allender, and part of the gist there, and we were talking about marriage, not this stuff, but you got to name that stuff and acknowledge it
Yes.
in order to process. So I think, if you're listening today and you're just like, oh, I feel that, like, you don't have to just stuff it and, like, I don't know, put a Christian Band-Aid on it. Like, no, I shouldn't feel that way. No, if you feel that way, like, it's better, healthier to just work through it, talk about it. I mean, and through it,
Absolutely.
even working through it, that sounds too overly simplistic. To be in it, let me put it that way, to sit in it.
Mhm.
Rachel, what are you thinking?
Yeah, as I was thinking back on my pregnancy, first of all, those of you that are listening today, I'm just so excited that you are going through your pregnancy with this new framework of mind. Like, this kind of information didn't exist when I was pregnant, for women going, it's okay to gain weight. It's okay. Because all I was hearing was just the overwhelming message of, yes, stay as small as you can, do not gain any weight. And for me, now that I look through the lens of body image freedom, now that I have not arrived, I've started this new journey. I'm 2 years in of this. I looked at that as this competition where I had to win, and I had to be this anomaly that they go, look at her, she's so small, like, she hasn't gained. I mean, I'm telling you, I would, like, try to eat as little as I could before I went, same as like a normal regular doc, take off the Apple Watch when I got weighed. I wanted my pee to be the clearest. Like, what is up with that? But now that I see I have so many people pleasing tendencies that are tied to so many deeper issues, I can tell that I wanted to be accepted and praised and applauded for my efforts. Like, you are winning, you are doing good at this. And the whole time, like Jackie, like you said, it was this shameful, pressureful situation rather than, oh my goodness, God, you are growing a life in me. That I didn't have that. It was more like, okay, I have got to do so good, and then I have to bounce back, whatever the world that means. Whoever came up with that phrase is crazy. I mean, would you ever read that in the Bible? No. What is that? And so I wish, and I don't wish I was pregnant now, but I wish that I had the framework then to go through a pregnancy with the lens of a grateful heart, and be able to see where I was really bowing down to cultural standards of, like, body worship, because I was totally doing that. And I even remember writing a letter to myself in my third pregnancy. So I was 33, and I also remember going, Jesus died at this age. Like, what am I doing having a baby? I don't know why. I just thought that was funny. But I remember going, okay, I know that I'm going to freak out after this baby's born because my body's going to change. So I'm going to write this note. And I can see that this was God's hand trying to show me that there is more, but it was me, like, trying to take an ibuprofen to cure cancer. This letter that I wrote to myself was not going to make it all go away and be better after. But I remember writing, like, don't forget these stretch marks are because, she was growing in you, and don't forget that your weight, even if it's higher, you'll work it off and it'll be. And so I was, like, now thinking, like, I see that letter as a desperate cry to go, okay, something can change, but that wasn't the way to do it. I didn't have the biblical framework to work through that. But I can see how it was just a shameful, pressure-filled situation instead of something different. So
Yeah. Yeah, Rachel, I love that you brought up the
I'm
word.
sorry, I think Siri was hearing me.
Oh, it's
So,
all right.
Heather, what did you say? Can you say it one more time?
Oh, I was jumping in, Rachel. I just
Oh,
was saying I'm so glad you brought up, well, two things. You mentioned this wasn't always available, right? So in my first two pregnancies, yeah, I wasn't informed of any of this. So I was still very
yes.
much like, this is, I have to follow the guidelines. And Heather does some really good episodes on
Absolutely.
agency. And I think part of my story has just been a complete lack of agency. I cannot trust myself. I have to do what the doctor says. They're the authority.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if I don't do it right, then I somehow have done something wrong. And I think there's, like Presley, you said, like, you're in trouble, right? You feel like I've
Hmm.
done something where I'm going to be
Oh,
scolded.
yeah.
And the other thing you mentioned was that competition feeling that, like, I'm going to be the unicorn. I'm going to do this differently.
Yes.
And it's funny because this pregnancy, I actually started off in a much bigger body than I did with my other two. And, you know, any sort of search online will reveal to you that when you start off bigger, you don't need to gain weight. And I'm putting air
Right.
quotes there. Like, you can gain just maybe 10 pounds. And I took that to heart as, like, I cannot gain more than that. And maybe
Yes.
I'll even lose weight while I'm pregnant. And I'm not pursuing that, but there is that background noise of, like, I could be the one who comes out of pregnancy and has lost weight. And you get all these anecdotes from people who are well-meaning, but they're like, "Oh, I have a friend who was overweight and she didn't gain anything in her pregnancy. All her body weight just moved to the baby." And you hear all this noise, and you think, I have to do that, or I have to do better. And that's the comparison trap too, right? Where it's like,
Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna be the best pregnant woman that has ever existed. And it's just gonna be different for me. And then we let ourselves down, right? Because we can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I was
Yeah.
thinking about the whole juxtaposition between, like, I am more afraid of being scolded by the doctor than I am of, you know, I don't even know what the right juxtaposition is, but it's like what the doctor says matters so much that I will tune everything else out. And again, not that you don't listen to your doctor, right? Like, I don't hope it doesn't sound extremist, right? Like, I mean, very glad I had good medical care and I had 4 C-sections. So extremely glad I had good medical care, right? But there are some things that you just know about your own body and about what makes your body feel good. And I actually think, and I did an episode on this maybe a year ago, like, no one gets upset about pregnancy cravings, right? Like, that's an assumed part of pregnancy, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like the one season of your life where it's like, ooh, if I'm craving pickles, then the baby needs sodium. So I have to eat the pickles, right?
So
And,
true.
and
So
but like
true.
but then, like, 3 days after you're pregnant, it's like, I'm craving pickles. I can't be craving pickles. I mean, not that pickles are a controversial food, but you know what I'm saying? It's like all of a sudden food cravings bad. And so, embracing, like, this opportunity during pregnancy to actually tune in, be attuned to your body, and then remembering that after pregnancy, right? That it's okay. Presley, you were going to jump in. I might have derailed the conversation from where you were going to go, but
Oh,
you're going to
no,
go ahead.
that's actually perfect. That's exactly what I was thinking. It came to mind while Rachel was talking. Like, if you're like, when I was getting pregnant with my second, or I was trying to anyway, I thought it's going to be such a relief from dieting. I can finally stop worrying about losing weight for 9 months. I'm
Yeah.
going to be able to let loose and enjoy my life and eat when everyone else is eating and eat whatever they're eating. And I can do, whatever I want, whatever that means. Like, I can eat when I'm hungry. It's allowed. I don't have to be counting calories. I don't have to watch my weight. But I mean, maybe some people still think that while they're pregnant, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, I need this break. So yeah, if I had been like that in my everyday life, I think I already would have been such a happier person, just being allowed to eat like I
Yes.
am now.
Wow.
Yes.
Allowed. Presley, allowed. I mean, that goes back to what Jackie said with agency,
Yikes. Yeah.
right? Allowed to eat.
Yes.
that's a whole different episode, but
Feels
we should
great.
just sit with that for a second.
Yeah.
Tara, you were going to
Yeah.
jump in.
Yeah, no, I was just like, I was thinking about that, that even more, had more complications to this tremendously emotional time in our lives, and just like the hormones. And as we were like saying before, like the ambivalence and all the feelings, is then you have this element of the health piece too. And I think we've come to a point now, and I think Heather, you do such a beautiful job of speaking to this on your podcast and stuff, as how health has really become part of our body image issues as well. Right. It's all together. And I think one of the scary things about when you're in this situation, and I love how you talked about agency, and Jackie, how you mentioned that in the podcast she did, because you go to the doctors and then you're labeled and you're put in these things like your weight is high risk, your age makes you high risk, you gain more than this range that they tell you, and it's too much, it's overweight. And it's like immediately it's, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm failing, me. And none of us, until I know I speak for me, but I know we can all relate, none of us ever thought to question, are the measurements part of the problem as well? And I know I always go back to like the BMI thing, because I feel like I was so fixated on that when I was pregnant. I was very, very obsessed with that, had no idea what the BMI was. And for all y'all who, if you haven't had listen to Heather's amazing podcast where she really breaks down what that number is and how it is absolutely not a measure of health. Um, and so what was just so hard for me is that I, even when I was trying to get myself to be in this perfect weight category, even when I started to eat so that I could get pregnant, and I was able to get pregnant, I was so terrified of gaining weight that from the moment I got pregnant, I was so terrified of gaining weight, and I was so terrified of something happening to my child if I didn't do everything perfectly. So it was like I literally
Yes.
did everything. I got off my antidepressants because I was terrified of what that could do. Never understanding the stress and what my mental state was going to be like during being pregnant and how that could affect my baby as well. And again, that can be a whole nother podcast, but like, I followed the diets. I did the baby set, like I did the books, I did everything I possibly could. And I just wanted to share this. And Jackie and I have had a chance to talk about this with her pregnancy now. It's just like, that was one of the hardest pregnancies for me. My son was born premature. He was born 2 months early. He was born with a kidney problem that needed surgery at a year old. He ended up at 18 months getting diagnosed with retinoblastoma cancer that he is doing wonderful. He's 13, it's all beautiful. Thank you, Jesus, now. But I say all these things because when I look back on that pregnancy, I controlled it. I stressed over it. I did everything that I thought was perfect. I gained the exact amount of weight. I was always in the right frame. And I still even ended up getting gestational diabetes. And I remember the doctors being like almost baffled by me. Like, this is so strange. Like, you don't fit the profile. You're not obese. You're not overweight. Like, you're young. I was only 30 at the time. So I was still not high risk. And I just share all these things because, kind of the me coming off of that pregnancy, I remember I didn't have as much weight to lose, and yet I immediately felt the pressure to lose the weight, get back to the pre-baby body. Like, you've got to do
Yeah.
something drastic. Like, but I couldn't do cleanses, I couldn't do fasting, I couldn't do strict diets, because now I want to feed my baby, right? I need to produce milk. And I just contrast that with my second pregnancy, where my daughter, it was like I I was like, they had me doing like progesterone shots because they couldn't figure out why my first baby was premature. And they were like, you just need to eat. And the doctor, she was so great. She gave me British. So it's kind of more like you, Pres, my second round. Like, this is great. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to eat the foods. I had gestational diabetes anyway, so I kind of already know how to eat. And, I'll just, it is what it is, God. I'm going to give it more to you. And I sort of had this mentality. But what happened was then I gained so much more weight. So after I had the baby, it was like during the pregnancy, I had this allowance to eat. I love that you said that, Prez. Like, I allowed myself, and it was such a
Yep.
different pregnancy than my
Feels
first.
good.
Yeah. And I had so much more peace and so much less stress. But my daughter was 12 months old and I hadn't lost the baby weight. And that is when my eating disorder really kicked off. That was the beginning of what I would say would be my struggle and my journey, over the last, 10, 9 years or so, was not being able at 1 year, 9 months up, 9 months down. Uh-oh, I'm past that 9 month mark. Nope, I failed. And that, it's hard.
Well, I was
Yes.
thinking about a couple realities here. I do actually think for anyone postpartum, maybe you guys can tell me whether or not you experience this. I'm talking to a friend of mine, a good friend right now, who is about at that 9 month mark. And I feel like something really weird happened for me at that 9 month mark. Like and maybe part of it was psychological, right? Where it's like I did have the 9 month up, 9 months down, like mentality from culture or whatever. But I also think like hormones were shifting so much. And I, and I vividly remember that being like a line in the stand where it's like, oh, this is the hardest it's ever been. But I also had gestational
Yes.
diabetes. And so with my first, I was definitely not someone who didn't look pregnant from the back. Like most people came up to me and said, you're having twins, right? Like, nope, just one baby in there. And I was in an eating disorder. I was a kickboxing instructor, like who taught aerobics classes until like she couldn't bounce anymore. Like that was where I was coming from. And when I had Zach, my oldest, they told me that they had never seen that much water. They had to break my water because I had to be induced. They had never seen that much water come out of a human being.
Oh my
Whoa.
gosh.
And he was 9 pounds, 4 ounces. He was big. But I never got diagnosed with gestational diabetes. I think for the same reason as you mentioned, Tara, like I had a small body and I didn't fit the profile or whatever. But then by my third, I was still small. But it was just clear, like, from the test that I had gestational diabetes this time. And then that led me back to dieting, right? Because then you have to send your food log to the doctor every week.
Yes.
And then I am hyper aware of every single little thing and what it does to my blood sugar. And I mean, and now, I was just reading something last night about a woman who got a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, during her pregnancy, and how like the drink the orange Kool-Aid test failed her, but the CGM said she had gestational diabetes. And so she was able to like kind of fight for her right to have gestational diabetes. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but she proved that like the orange drink test didn't matter or whatever. But so there's just so many health related things to what you're saying, Tara, where it's like there's fear around that and you want to manage that correctly. And I'll share this anecdotally. So with my fourth, so I had 4 babies in just like right under 5 years. My oldest turned 5 months after my youngest was born. So literally I had 4 and under.
Wow.
And after my third, I had gestational diabetes, and they were like, you're going to have it with your fourth. Like, it's only been 18 months, you have it. And I was like, I do not want to have it. I'm not going to have it. And so I drank the Kool-Aid and I walked laps of that hospital. So I was walking the solid hour.
Oh my gosh, I get it.
And I passed that test by 1 point. And they were like, we don't really think you passed. I'm like, I passed. It's just so anyway, every doctor is probably upset that I shared that strategy, but go ahead.
But the metrics mean so much when you're pregnant, right? It's like that feeling of pass or fail.
Yeah.
So like I have, like I said, I started this pregnancy larger. So I was tested earlier for gestational diabetes, because of my weight, and I passed it. But it was just like, it's just that fear, right? The fear of like, I have to check all the boxes. And if I don't check all the boxes, then somehow I've done something wrong. And we get so wrapped up in that. And other things too, like preeclampsia. So my doctor recommended, because of my weight, I should maybe consider taking baby aspirin during my pregnancy. Now, mind you, I haven't had it with my other 2 pregnancies. There's no history of it in my family. And in fact, I have a very low blood pressure,
Wow.
typically. So I said no. Like I said, I'm not going to do that, but I'm in a different place now. If they had said that to me in my second pregnancy, I would have done it and I would have been so worried. And, I think,
Yes.
and again, not to, bring down the doctors, like they're doing their job, right? But it's just, those are the measures. And the more information we have, the more scared we feel. Like, I'm going to fail. I'm going to mess it up. It's going to be my fault.
Yes.
Something's going to happen to my baby.
Yeah.
And it's all going to be on me. And there's so much shame and fear that just pile on during this experience. I mean, there are so many different directions I want to go with this, but I just think those are the two themes I think I keep hearing consistently in our answers is like,
Yeah.
I'm ashamed, I'm afraid, I'm not doing something right. And isn't
Yeah.
that just diet mentality at the utmost anyway? Like I'm not doing something right, and therefore my body's not right, and I'm not right.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
kind of exacerbates in pregnancy.
Did anyone else have a miscarriage? You had one, Rachel? I had one between baby
Yeah.
2 and baby 3.
Yeah, mine was between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And so that was a whole nother level of things.
Mhm.
But something you had said, Jackie, is about control. And that was even something the Lord was working with me on today. I mean, control is still something that I'm trying to have. If I can control my environment enough, then I can feel happy. And if I can control my kids enough, then things will go well. And if I can control what you think of me, then I'll be safe. And all of that. I wish I had this knowledge then, but that was all of I was trying to control your perception of me and control how, because I was on a stage, I was leading worship, I was on a jumbotron every Sunday, and people
Wow.
I shared this in my story when Heather interviewed me, but there was a guy that came up. We had announced my pregnancy probably like, I don't know, 20 weeks in. I was kind of still in the
I
like
remember
hide it
this.
stage. Yeah, and he came up after, he's like in his 50s. I don't really even know him that well, but he was like, I'm so glad to know you were pregnant because I saw you gaining weight and I was just really wondering what was going on.
Oh boy.
And
No.
I
Oh.
was like, I kind of want to punch you in the face. I didn't, but
Yeah.
I said, yeah, we're pregnant. And thankfully the Lord just like helped me to have grace in that moment. I was like, we're so excited. But then I was like, that really made me so mad, that someone is caring. First of all, if I'm gaining weight, what does my weight have to do with you? And then
Right.
it was the pressure of, okay, now you've had the baby, you have to get back on the stage, you've got photo shoots, you've got stuff to do. So sorry, baby, I'm glad you're here, but like I need to really keep focusing on me. And I was thinking that breastfeeding would make me lose weight. I was the non-unicorns who gain it,
Oh, me
and I
too,
was like,
girl.
why am
Yeah,
I
me
gaining
too.
it? And they're losing it. Like, I don't have to do anything, it's just falling off. And so, but I see, Jackie, like you said too, it's like these were just the steps that God was taking me to get me to the end of myself. It was, and that was even 9 years ago. And then God is still, this is just a process of sanctification over and over and over. But I'm still learning how I'm still trying to grip control. But it was heightened during that season.
Yeah, that's good. Pres.
Oh yeah. Earlier I was just thinking about how it feels so good to be free with food while you're pregnant. If you're like me and you thought getting pregnant would be a fun free time. And then how much the moment you have the baby, the pressure is on. You have to get it off because everybody's looking. And like Rachel, that guy, like, why are we looking at each other like that? Why?
Yes.
It'll be nice when we can unlearn those behaviors and those comments and
Mhm.
just let people be in their bodies.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Tara.
Yeah, and I just wanted to just thinking for the women out there too who, as we're sharing, like who are where Jackie is and where Presli is, even a few years out, but also, to speak to like Rachel, you and me who have like 10 years more out from our babies. It's almost like that pressure doesn't go away to get the postpartum body. It's like that never
Yes.
goes away, no matter how far you are having
Never.
your babies, it never leaves us. This pressure our culture tells us that it is like a badge of honor. You are a success. There is like this self glorification and being like, not only this was my thing. Not only did I get back to my pre-baby body, I got thinner. So
Yes.
when I hit
Yes.
40, I was probably at my thinnest. I was at my thinnest because I had an undiagnosed eating disorder. So my dieting, my yo-yo dieting, my cycling since I was, 8 years old, finally caught up to me, didn't work anymore. So what happened? I ended up with anorexia, and it was just like, okay, I just want to eat because that's the only way that I can maintain this weight. And at that point, I wasn't losing any more weight. I was just literally not eating so that I wouldn't gain any more weight. And it was like a badge of honor. I mean, it was like, I'm 40 and I am at my thinnest. And then it was like this kind of like back to this idea of competition. It's this competition of who's the hottest mom, the hot mom kind of thing. And it's like, as our kids get older, it's like, well, I want my kids to, I don't want my kids to be, I don't want embarrassment to my kids. I want to be cool to my kids. Well, how am I going to be cool to my kids? I'm going to be the hot mom. I'm going to be the cool mom that every and
Oh
then
yeah.
these thoughts of like, I don't know if this is a term still used, but I remember my mom saying this often, and it stuck with me. Is like, I remember her grabbing her stomach and talking about menopause and saying that was like her matronly body now. And this idea of like older mom and a matronly body and it being such a bad thing. And she'd hold her stomach and she'd touch her stomach and she'd feel it. And I'd watch her. And I didn't realize that at the time what message that was sending to me. That's like, oh, you can't let this happen. And like the shame that she felt and she was always just a nice, figure. And all of a sudden she had this like belly and it was like the worst thing in the world. And I'm just a little girl thinking, huh. And so what that does to us, and now I think it's just gone to different levels that we are, we're 10, 15 years out and we're still chasing the postpartum body or the pre-baby body, I should say.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, because that's how you win.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yes.
Presley,
Yes.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Tara said, like, or like being the hot mom, or you want to look like you still got it, or you don't want to look your age, and you don't want to have that mommy tummy. Like, I don't know, after I had my C-section, my stomach was never the same. It just wasn't. And I didn't want it to look like I don't got it anymore. Like I'm not, just my body was never the same after that. And I just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
How many of you had C-sections?
me too.
Presley had 2. Tara, you didn't.
No, I
Rachel,
didn't.
Jackie, all clear. Yeah, I had 4 C-sections.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
So yeah, and that there's a whole story in there in and of itself of disappointment, control. Like I had my
Yes.
birth plan. I told them exactly what I wanted to do, and it was not supposed to end in a C-section. And then I got pregnant with Katie, like when Zach was just 16 months old. And so they were like, there's no way you could VBAC. You have to have a C-section, which actually saved her life because her cord was wrapped around her neck. And so now it's easy to be like, oh,
Mine
I'm glad I had a
too.
C-section. Really? Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So I was just curious about that. Jackie, you were going to jump in.
Yeah. I lost my thought because
Because you're pregnant?
Because you're
I'm
pregnant.
like, I didn't say pregnant. No,
Best
actually,
excuse
I got
ever.
it back. I got it back. Tara, when you mentioned like wanting to be like the hot mom, I also thought there's another element to this, at least for me, of well, I don't want to lose my husband's attraction to me either, right? So we just came out of marriage month.
Yes.
And there was one quote, Heather, you said about how we want them to objectify us. Like, it's like, if I could just get back
Yes.
to the pre-pregnancy, oh, this is the body you married, right? Like I need to be back there. Otherwise there's a shame.
Yeah.
I almost felt like I was letting my husband down. And
Yes.
before we had our third, I felt like I had to lose weight before I got pregnant, which actually made me gain a ton of weight because, and that's a whole nother story. But it was like I had to get to that starting point. Like I had this starting point in my mind that was the safe place to get pregnant. And if I couldn't reach there, then I shouldn't get pregnant because then I'm basically giving up my body and any hope that it will ever go back
Right? I
to
had
what
that
it
too.
was. Yeah.
I had that too. Like, I can't get pregnant unless I'm this weight. And then, like, because then I'm going to be over this weight once I gain the right amount of, yeah.
Yeah, that language you just used there, Jack, is pretty interesting. Giving up my body, right? Like in some ways, that is what we have to do when we get pregnant,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. And
Yes.
You
actually
do just
on
give
that,
up your body. Go ahead. Yeah.
I have a good friend who we had this conversation. She's actually also pregnant right now. And I want to give her credit because this was beautiful. But she said, we live in a culture that's like my body, my choice, and my body is everything. And Jesus said, here is my body broken for you, right? And
Wow.
there is a
Yeah.
sense like when you are
Oh, I
pregnant, your
love that.
body is not just yours, right? It's your
Mhm.
baby's. Like it's
So
their
good.
home. It's their first home. And
Oh,
and even after they're born, like you provide their nourishment. It's like
Mhm.
your body is not yours anymore. There is a
Yeah.
dying to self that has to happen to give life,
Yeah.
right? And I think that image just stuck
That's
with me.
so
It's
good.
such a
Yeah.
beautiful image of the
Yeah, that's
gospel that we
beautiful.
don't necessarily grasp or even think about because we're so concerned about our own shame
Yeah.
and we're not ready to give up our bodies.
Just getting pregnant is sanctification.
Mm,
Amen.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tara. You're going to jump in.
Oh yeah, no, and gosh, what you just said, Jackie, is so beautiful. And I'm so glad that you went there with that because I think that's so true. And I think back now to again, going back to what Rachel originally said and what the beauty of the listeners now who get to hear this is um you get to experience things that we missed out on because we were so tightly holding on to what culture told us we were supposed to
Yes.
do that we missed out on so much because we listened to the world's word more than we listened to God's word. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, Jackie. And I was just thinking when you were talking about your husband, because we were kind of piggybacking off Marriage Month, and I just thought that was such a great thing to bring up because I actually remember saying this, recently, even to my husband, X many years after the baby and, eating disorder and just the body's changing, it's aging, all the very many facets with which our body changes, not just because, we want to put so much blame on ourselves. Like my body has changed so much because I dieted and I had an eating disorder and all this stuff. Sure. But I'm also older and I've had two babies and like, yes, it's going to change. And I looked at my husband one day and I just remember I finally had to have the conversation with him because I was holding it in for so long. The shame of like guilt that I let him down, that I ruined, like I'm so sorry. And I remember I looked at him one night and I was sobbing and I said, and we have a wedding picture next to our bed. And I looked at him and I said, I am so sorry that I don't look like that anymore, that I'm not that person for you anymore. And it was like, I'm so grateful that in that moment, he's not the most sensitive of men. Like he's a wonderful man, but he's not like your typical like empathetic romantic kind of guy. He's a little bit more of like the stoic, like tell you like it is. But in that moment, he just looked at me. He goes, "Okay, well, I guess I should apologize to you because I'm not that man in that picture anymore either." And I just was like,
Oh, yeah.
"Oh my God!" Like I
So
don't even
true.
see it that way because I don't look at him that way. I don't objectify him that way. I like in no way I look at the man in that picture and think, "Oh, he was a great guy, and I'm so glad I chose him." But like, oh Lord, the man I have today with the wisdom and the growth that he's had is a
Mhm.
heck of a lot better than that man was. And I think of that young girl, like pre-babies, not a mom yet, like how like motherhood is one of the greatest steps to curing the sin nature of selfishness, right? We never have to be more selfless. Like as you were saying, Jackie,
That's
with our
so true.
bodies, letting our bodies not be our own, this dying to self, like it's
Mhm.
such a beautiful, because guess what? When that baby comes, it's a continuation of that and it's a sanctification process. And so just remembering like, oh my gosh, yes, like my outer, it goes, reminds me back of what Paul says, like my outer being is wasting away. This
Mhm.
temporary body's going to change and it's going to maybe over time look a little less than compared to what the
Mhm.
culture tells us. But oh God, the sanctification that's happening within us because of
Mhm.
what we're doing here is it's worth it. It's so worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Well, thinking about postpartum, to kind of transition to that. I don't, well, the thought keeps coming to mind. You were talking about your husband's opinion of your body. So my son was probably 12 or 13 and was kind of having some, I'm going to call them body image issues of his own, feeling like he didn't look the way he needed to look to have friends and all the things. And I was trying to relate to him. And I was like, well, son, you know, mom has the same struggle too. Mom actually writes books about it. Mom thinks that she should be skinnier. And he looked at me just kind of startled. Okay, so he's a teenager, preteen teenager. He's like, what? He's like, you're mom size. I was like,
Yes.
but it was like the most derogatory and yet most complimentary thing anyone had ever said to me all at the same time, right? Because in some
Yeah.
ways it was like, oh, that hurt. Mom size, right? But then another way it's like, oh, but I am the mom. Like that's my role here. I'm no longer like a teenage peer. I am the mom, and my son sees me as mom size. Like, oh, maybe I need to accept myself as mom size too. But thinking about postpartum, right? There's there's a lot there, right? We talked a little bit about like the pressure to bounce back. Um, you know, for me, I was dieting to bounce back, but actually more so, my kids had some sensitivities, food sensitivities, like nursing problems. And so by my third, I had postpartum depression pretty severely. And I think it was related to what I was not eating because I was pretty much down to applesauce as the only food
Wow.
that didn't irritate him. You know, I cut out dairy, I had, cut out garlic and onions and all the controversial vegetables. And I mean, like soy and, you name it, like the whole list,
Oh,
gluten, of
wow.
course, like I cut it all out. And so I was barely eating. And in some ways, right, like this is the disturbed eating disorder mind that I had. In some ways, it was like, this is awesome, right? Because I'm
Yeah,
only
enjoying
Yes.
it.
because I can only eat
Yep.
applesauce, I'm going to be the skinniest mom of three you've ever seen, right?
Yes.
But what it was doing to my mental health was horrible. And so finally I went to my counselor. My counselor was like, you need to see your doctor. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, you need to see a counselor. You guys just agree? Like I need something. And really what it came down to was, so one of the things, this is ironic, one of the things that I just had to research for myself because they neither one of them gave me the answers I needed. And something I was researching said eat more bananas. And bananas had been a fear food of mine, right? Because they had so many carbohydrates and
Oh,
Weight
yeah.
Watchers only let you eat half and all the things,
Yes.
right? So I started eating bananas like a wild woman and eating more stuff. And eventually, I'm not saying this is the case for every woman with PPD, right? I mean, and if meds are what you need, meds are what you need. But for me, just eating more, including those bananas and the potassium and all the other things, like that helped me significantly. And that was my first probably introduction into kind of being anti-diet. I don't like that label so much, but recognizing like, ooh, wait, dieting might not be the best thing for me as a whole person.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you guys? What was it like after baby?
Well,
Yeah.
I think
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jackie. Go
just
ahead.
it reminds me again of the competition mindset because I very much felt like not just with bouncing back, but being a first time mom or a second time mom and like, when your child has some kind of issues, again, you feel like it's your fault. Like, oh, I have to cut this food group out, or I should be,
Right.
exercising more, whatever the case may be. And we put so much burden on ourselves to do the right thing. And whatever happens with our baby feels like our fault again. I had one son who had very bad colic, and I think, and he ended up having reflux. And I still wonder sometimes, like, well, I was taking reflux medication my whole pregnancy, and then he needed that reflux medication. Like, does that mean it was my fault? Like, did I do this to him? And I think, we get so caught up in that of doing everything right, or breastfeeding versus formula feeding, and or how
Yep.
long are you going to breastfeed? I had to give up breastfeeding with my first after 8 months because I got pregnant again. So, that 8 months, I didn't get to that sweet spot because we were ready for another one. And then it was like I couldn't breastfeed. It was just too much. So there's just a lot of like disappointment of what I thought it was supposed to look like versus what actually happened for
Yes.
me. And I've found that that was consistent for both of my postpartum journeys. Like, this is not really what I thought it was going to be. Even down to like, I just a silly thing of maybe 4 months postpartum with my first, I'm like, this is kind of boring. Like, I don't really want to take care of him. And I felt so much shame for feeling that way
Mhm.
because it was like, I'm supposed to
Oh,
cherish every moment with this
yes.
beautiful little newborn. And that was just,
Yeah.
there are these like real thoughts happening. And then it's like, you try to fit them
Yes.
into the puzzle piece of like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like postpartum.
Yeah.
And it just never lined up for me.
Yeah, I think acknowledging that disappointment, like that's the word, right? Because you do feel shame when you feel that disappointment. I was the same way. I was like, this is what
Yeah,
I've
me
wanted all
too.
my life, and this is hard.
Yes.
This is so much
Yes.
harder.
Yes.
Tara, you were going to jump in, then Presley, and then Rachel.
Oh yeah, no, that was so good, Jackie. And I was thinking too, just about after with like the, kind of continuing with the same things that we face with the pregnancy. You face the exact same things with the postpartum. It's the control. It's the, again, who are we listening to and where are all these guidelines coming? And let's be honest, it's not unlike the diet culture that we hear, where the nutrition, the food rules, what is good one decade is now different another decade, even with pregnancy and postpartum. What is good, and with babies, like there's so much we don't know. Do this for your baby. You can read 2 books that tell you to do the total opposite things, and like each one will tell you this
Yes.
is
Well,
100% the way to do it.
I slept on my stomach,
Yes,
right?
right.
And then and then I learned like you should never put the baby
Never.
down the stomach. And my mom's like, why don't you put the baby down the stomach? I'm like, because that will kill him.
Yes,
We won't do that. Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, it's one of those things where I think we have to remember that aspect as well as we're on this, body image journey. A lot of us are starting to really be awakened to the truth of the lies that we've believed. And I think we have to start incorporating that too within our pregnancies and within our postpartum and within our raising of our children, is how many lies are we still believing from culture over the word? And the truth is, like, God created this. God made us and our bodies to give life. And we are not in control of that. He is. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't have hardships and difficult things and all this stuff. But like, I mean, I remember when my son was diagnosed with cancer at 18 months, and I had done everything perfectly, or so I thought. And I remember truly struggling for like a year, thinking that I did something wrong. Like I had to have messed up somehow. And they told me, like, there's no genetic links. It's it's just a fluke. Like they don't know why. And it's like, no, I had to have done something wrong. If I can just figure it out, I can prevent it. And that's because it was fear, right? It's all the fears that we bring to it. And, and I just wanted to piggyback on what you said, Heather, because it was really funny about the mom body. And I just love that. And for me, even where I am at right now with having a 13-year-old son, it's very different. Like, so I have a son and a daughter, and how they perceive me is very different, right? And having a 13-year-old son with a mom, like he's starting like independence. Okay, mom, like, my son doesn't want to see me as a hot mom. That's not what he wants. That's not what makes me valuable or amazing to him at all. And when I gained weight through this journey of healing my body, and my body got much larger, my son didn't balk at it. He didn't notice it. It didn't matter to him in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, I found that he became much more comfortable knowing that when we were going to go out to a pool somewhere, and stuff, that I was going to be wearing like maybe my bathing suit shorts and like a bathing suit t-shirt, and I wasn't going to be walking around in a bikini, because as a 13-year-old boy, seeing moms walking around in bikinis, like that's uncomfortable for him. So anyways, I just wanted to say I love the mom body, because that helps me where I'm at right now too.
Oh yeah. I was just wanting to comment on what Jackie said about, she was talking about breastfeeding. And it reminded me of when I had my last son 3 years ago, that how important it was that I breastfeed. Like I needed to be like, I mean, it was equivalent to food as organic. I needed to feed him organic. And so I was gonna do that. But he had something wrong with his lip. They said he had a lip tie or something. So he couldn't latch. But I literally
Oh.
wouldn't give up. I kept trying to the point of, I'm bloody, I'm getting infections, I'm getting persistent mastitis, I'm in so much pain, I'm in the back and forth from the hospital
Oh.
with those lumps. And eventually one of those lumps developed into, I think it was I can't remember the word, but it went septic. It turned into like a serious infection. I had to go to the ER. My doctor sent me straight to the ER. It was like a lump as hard as a rock. And he sent me to the doctor and they
Wow.
surgically removed it. And I was left with a gaping wound. And I had to go home and my husband had to pack that breast wound. So like that was super exposing. But yeah, like he had to pack
Oh,
that
Wow.
wound. And just because I wouldn't give up the breastfeeding, like I wanted the calories burned from the breastfeeding. I wanted him to eat organic. I wanted it to be how I wanted it to be. I didn't want to go to formula. And honestly, neither did my husband because he's from South Africa and here they're like really serious about breastfeeding. Like if you love your child, you breastfeed. So he didn't want me to give up either. He was even getting up late into the night washing my pump for me. And I still got these infections. And eventually, after I had the surgery and almost died in the hospital, he was like, if we ever have more children, you're never breastfeeding.
oh,
Um,
wow.
Yeah.
yeah, and with my 9-year-old, I never breastfeed. I never had the opportunity because he was taken to the NICU immediately because he was born with a cleft lip, which we didn't know about until he was born. So I didn't have the opportunity. So I really wanted to breastfeed this time. And yeah, it went terribly wrong.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Pres. That sounds really hard. Yikes. I mean,
Yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't fun.
you were talking about those infections, and I was like, oh, I remember getting a couple of those, and like immediately my breasts hurt really bad just hearing that word.
Yeah, my infection got
So
infected.
painful.
Like
Oh,
it
so
was bad.
painful.
Yikes. Rachel, jump in. Unless you have
Yeah,
more
you had
infections to talk about.
you had asked what it was like postpartum, and I remember, okay, well, here I am now with this newborn baby, and mine also had colic, and I remember crying like, if this is what babies are, I don't know what I was, just like crying. I also struggle with a lot of postpartum sadness but anyway, back to I had all this time now. Like I was rocking her, and here I was, and she didn't nurse for long either. It was not as bad as your situation, Pres, but it wasn't. I was forcing it also because it's just what you do. It's what you do. I was gonna win, remember? But here I am, all hours of the night, alone with my phone, and all this time to scroll. And I'm like, okay, this is a good time for me to find the right diet, for me to find the right workout plan. I can't tell you how many countless befores and after photos I looked at people, Fitspo, just like, so instead of listening to the voice of God, which is, would be so different from all that, I thought,
Yeah.
quote unquote, I was doing the right thing. This is a good time for me to like kind of beat myself back into submission, get a plan, because if I have a plan, I can stick to it. So every time I was nursing, it was like I was creating this, I was reinforcing this toxic soundtrack in my mind of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is the right thing. This is what will get me to safety. This is what will. So if I could do it again, I would not be scrolling that. I would not be looking up everything. Are you kidding me? I didn't even know things existed to worry about till I Googled something. And I would use that time differently, because that was a time I really allowed the voice of the world to deceive me, and I fell prey to that. And then talk about getting me on the track to my most disordered time of life. It was in those dark, alone moments after she was born, all three of them, that I started to like learn this new language and learn this new way that was not God's wisdom. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was really
Yeah.
good, Rachel. And what I hear in what you said, and what Presley used these exact words because I wrote them down. But it's like, and this is probably where we're going to have to tie it up today, but wrestling with the like, I want it to be how I want it to be. Right. And so
Yeah.
you have this whole struggle through pregnancy. I want it to be how I want it to be. I want to be the woman that no one knows is pregnant from the back, right? That's winning. Or I want to be the woman who gains less than everyone else did. Or the woman who has got a doctor that congratulates her for being like the healthiest pregnant woman ever, right? Like all of these like silly little
Yes.
things, right? And then like maybe it's like me, I want it to be how I want it to be with your birth story, right? When you're comparing birth stories, it's like, oh, you went natural, and I'm like, I'm gonna go natural. And then the doctor's like, no way, honey, you're having a C-section. That baby's not going through. And then, it's like, so you've got this like
Yes.
again, like, oh God, you broke down. I want it to be how I want it to be. And then breastfeeding, I want it to be how I want it to be. I want to breastfeed. It's gonna be easy. It's gonna be this wonderful experience. And then I'm going to bounce right back because I want it to be how I want it to be. Right. And it's like, isn't that the struggle of our life? Right? I've got these
Yeah.
expectations and these disappointments, and I want it to be how I want it to be. And like Rachel, as you were talking, I mean, fortunately, when I had most of mine, I didn't have the access on my phone. Too old. I think I probably had it by like the last two. I probably had it by then, but at that point, I
Yeah.
had two toddlers, and so I did
Yeah.
not have that many eyes to look at the phone and the two toddlers and the two babies. Um, but how we miss out on the present, right? Because we're like super excited to get to that place with our body where we want it to be how, like where it will be how we want it to
Yes.
be, right? And that's kind of what
Yes.
you were doing, right? Like, I can't wait because, oh, then I'm going to feel this joy. The joy didn't come with the baby, but the joy is definitely going to come postpartum when I get
Right.
that hot body. And when people tell me, you look really good for a mom of 4, you look really good for a mom of 2, right? Like,
Yes.
that's the badge of honor. Like, oh, yeah, I do. Okay, great. Like, I've arrived, I've won, to use Jackie's language, right? And Rachel's language. So yeah, I would just say, like, as we kind of tie up this conversation, not neatly by any stretch of the imagination, but like, what if part of the equation with body image and pregnancy and body image postpartum is really considering surrender, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like,
That's it.
so quick thoughts, because we got to tie this up. We've gone long, but any quick thoughts on that as we kind of conclude our conversation today? What does it mean to
Well,
surrender?
one thing I was gonna say too is like if instead of that now, if I went back, surrendering would look like listening to your podcast. Like if I'm having that time, stick an AirPod in and learn what it means to have God's perception instead of mine. So surrendering everything that I've known, which are very strong neural pathways, they are developed, and that is all I have known. But surrendering, trusting that, oh my gosh, I'm kind of scared because I really don't know what this looks like. But Jesus, I trust you and I know that you're calling me into more. So I want to listen to things and look at things that are going to put your voice back in my head and my heart instead of what the world says, because it's everywhere and it's so loud. But one practical thing I would do is listen to your podcast. I mean, and just learn
Yeah.
God's view of my body.
Yeah.
And maybe I would have enjoyed those moments so much more. I
Yeah.
regret the self-focused pride obsession I had during those times.
Well, I'm even thinking like join the 40-day journey, because I think I
Yes.
would have been like, well, I don't want to join that because I don't have a body image issue now. Like, I need to make sure, like, because the body image issue maybe will go away after I have the
Absolutely.
baby. And so it's not
Yes.
a
Yes.
season where I can
Yes.
work on that or whatever, but it's like, it's
Yes.
the perfect season for
Oh,
that.
actually, yeah, you have all this time to rock a baby and read a book. So
I
where were
was,
you during those times
yeah.
for me, Heather? No, I'm just kidding.
I was thinking the same thing with the surrender piece, Heather, and I was just thinking like the 40 the 40-day journey too with that, because I look back and I really I learned surrender in a very harsh way. And at the time it felt horrible. And now I realize, like, God, you are so good in your mercy and your love, that doing everything perfectly. And then finding, the first 5 years of my son's life, we lived in a hospital. And like, the fact is like, he really showed me there was so much pride and arrogance because I really thought that I could do a better job at growing the life inside me, and I could do a better job, and I had a better idea and plan for how it should all look than he could ever could. And just because I don't understand his plan doesn't mean that it's not there and it's good. And the fact that I can't understand it actually might be a blessing, because if I could understand it, how big of a God is he really? If
Right.
my
Yes,
if
for
my
sure.
minimal brain can understand it, he's not as big as, but he's bigger. And so I think the
Yeah.
40-day journey, the reason I say that's so good is like, if I could take, I always think of this, if I could take the tools that I have now and the surrender and then what I've learned and kind of go back in time, it's like, oh Lord, but it's like, okay, it happens for each of us in the perfect timing that God has. But for those out there now, like, to start on the 40-day journey, and learn what surrender is really like.
Yes,
Do
absolutely.
it.
It would be super
Absolutely.
fun. It would be super fun to have a whole 40-day journey filled with pregnant and
Oh my
postpartum
goodness,
women. Like, we'll
yes,
put you in a group with
yes.
other people like you. So come, that'll be fun. Any last thoughts, Jackie or
Lead.
Presley?
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, yeah, the surrender is letting go of what you think things are supposed to look like. And that's true of my whole body image story and especially in pregnancy, but just this idea that we need to create an image for ourselves. You know, it's the idolatry piece, right? Like I think my whole, like I said, pregnancy is what brought me into recovery. And I knew something wasn't right. I knew I needed help. And I think it's just been this journey of like, okay, this doesn't look like what I wanted. I don't look like what I want to. But like Tara said, God is not interested in what my postpartum body looks like. God is interested in my sanctification and growing closer to Him, and chasing the right things is part of that surrender of like, okay, I need to let go of these idols and I need to chase the
Yes.
Lord and be after
Yeah.
His heart.
Yeah. Can you imagine Mary like she was a teenager? But can you imagine Mary like in the like can you imagine
Oh my
scripture
gosh.
reading like, and as soon as Jesus was born, Mary got right back.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Mary refused to ride on the donkey because she needed to burn off the like it's just
Yes.
it's so silly to like picture these issues we
Yes.
have now that are super relevant. And I'm not dismissing them at all because they're real, but they're super in our face. It's
Yes.
so silly to think about people in Bible times, like thinking in this disordered way that we think now. But
Absolutely.
any final thoughts, Presley?
Yeah, so I think just the freedom not to be worrying about my body is just the best gift ever. So if I could go back, I would love to have found this podcast sooner, been involved with the 40-day journey sooner. Just because like, yeah, just the freedom. It is so much better than skinny feels.
Love it.
And yet, yeah.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah. Freedom is better than skinny feels. Yes.
Amen.
We know that. We know that. You guys, thanks so much for this conversation today. I pray that for all those listening, this was helpful and encouraging and hopefully hope filled as well, right? Because that's what we want. We want you to have hope that you actually can be free from this, that if you are obsessing over your body all of the time, and if pregnancy made that worse or better, or if postpartum made that worse or better, just know like you don't have to stay there. You can find freedom. So thank you for watching or listening today. I hope something today has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye bye.